My name is Janet Knodel. I'm the Extension Entomologist for North Dakota State University. Soybean aphid is a chronic pest that we've had here in North Dakota since 2001 when we first discovered it. It's very important to get out and start scouting in the early vegetative stages all the way up through our early R6, which is the pod development stage. Early in the season, you want to go out and look at the top growth, the tender growth. That's where the soybean aphids are going to be most concentrated. And then after it gets into the reproductive stages later in the season and mid-August, you want to start looking down into the lower canopy. You need to look underneath the leaves or on the underside of the leaves. If the population density is high, you can also see them on the stems and pods, and they may be on the top part of the leaf in high densities. But you want to walk a W pattern when you're out scouting and check at least 5 spots in the field and try to avoid the edges because populations could be higher in the edges. And at each site, sample at least 10 plants per site. And then you want to calculate an average number of aphids per plant. The economic threshold is an average of 250 aphids per plant and 80% of the plants infested with the soybean aphid. And then we'd like to see continuous scouting at least twice a week and have increasing populations of soybean aphid. We're starting to see pyrethroid resistance occurring in soybean aphid. In 2017, we got a lot of reports from soybean farmers about the pyrethroids not controlling the soybean aphids. So we started doing some research. We did some insecticide field testing, and also in the lab we did standard glass bioassays. We tested 2 different chemicals, the active ingredient lambda-cyhalothrin, which is warrior in generics, and bifenthrin, which is tundra, sniper, and other trade names. So after we finished the testing, we determined that both insecticides had soybean aphids that were resistant. We found anywhere up to 50 to 70% survivorship from different locations in North Dakota. And part of the reason we're seeing insecticide resistance is the biology of the soybean aphid. It has a very fast reproductive rate. In 7 days, it can give birth to live young, and then those live young can reproduce within 7 days. So we call that a telescoping generations. And then also we have multiple generations here in North Dakota. Every summer we can have up to 10 or more generations of soybean aphid. So those factors there encourage the development of insecticide resistance. And then some of the other factors that go into account is our pest management strategies. We've used the pyrethroid group of insecticide continuously, and when you use one group of insecticides, the pyrethroids, it would encourage the development of insecticide resistance. So we need to spray when we're at the economic threshold and wait. So that means we don't want to tank mix with a herbicide application that's going on early. And if we're going to put a second application on for control of soybean aphid or other insect pests like thistle caterpillars, we'd want to rotate to a new mode of action, like an organophosphate or one of the newer insecticides. So if you do observe resistance out in the field, and to do that, you need to go back to the field after you sprayed with insecticide and check it about 3 days later. See if you've gotten good control or kill with that insecticide. If not, you may have resistance. The only way to determine if it is resistance is to notify Extension Entomology. We'll come out and sample your soybean aphids and we would have to run a laboratory bioassay to determine the level of resistance. But it's probably a good factor that you're going to have resistant aphids if you didn't get very good control. If you have resistance, you definitely need to switch to a completely different mode of action and move away from the pyrethroid group. You need to switch to a new mode of action like an organophosphate insecticide, Soybean, or one of the newer modes of actions that we have for some of the new chemistries like Transform, Savanto Prime, and Safina.